Picture this: the United States and Canada, two giant neighbors sharing the longest undefended border in the world. For years, that line has seemed unbreakable, a permanent fixture on the map. But what if it wasn't? What if some states, fed up with the chaos of American politics or lured by Canada's quieter stability, decided to pack up and head north? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? But hold on. Some states already have ties to Canada that run deeper than you might think. Economically, culturally, even historically, they're closer to their northern neighbor than to Washington, D.C. Could Vermont's independent spirit lead it astray? Could Alaska, dangling out there on its own, cut ties? Let's explore the top 10 states that might, just might, join Canada. Trust me, you're in for a wild ride. Let's start with a state that's always felt a little different: Vermont. You know it. Those cozy little towns, the smell of maple syrup in the air, the crunch of leaves underfoot in fall. It's picturesque, sure, but here's the thing. Vermont might just feel more Canadian than American. Think about it. Back in the 1700s, Vermont wasn't even part of the U.S. It was its own republic, an independent nation, until 1791, when it reluctantly joined the Union. That rebellious streak? It's still there. There's even a movement called the Second Vermont Republic, and they've been shouting from the rooftops for years that Vermont should break free. Why? Well, take a look at their values. Progressive policies, a love for social programs, a focus on sustainability. It's like they're reading from Canada's playbook. And then there's the economy. Vermont and Quebec, just across the border, trade millions in goods every year. Lumber, dairy, you name it. They're practically best friends already. Culturally, too, Vermonters share that quiet, community-driven vibe you find in Canada. So imagine this. What if Vermont said, "Enough is enough," and decided to join its northern neighbor? Could this be the spark that starts a modern secession wave? Stick around. We're just getting started. Next up, Maine. Now, this one might shock you. Did you know Maine literally depends on Canada to keep the lights on? That's right. A huge chunk of its electricity flows down from Quebec's hydroelectric plants. We're talking billions of dollars in trade, too. Over $3 billion worth of goods crossing the border every year. Timber, seafood, paper products. It's a lifeline. But it's not just about money. Maine feels Canadian in ways you can't ignore. Picture those rocky coastlines, the tight-knit fishing villages, the pockets of French-speaking folks up near the border. It's got more in common with New Brunswick than, say, Texas or California. Politically, Maine often leans toward Canada's style, less about Washington's gridlock, more about practical solutions. Here's a fun fact. Maine wasn't always its own thing. It was part of Massachusetts until 1820, when it broke off. So, it's got a history of splitting away. What if it did it again? Imagine Maine cozying up to Canada, blending into the maritime provinces. Before we move on, quick favor, hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying this. We've got a lot more to unpack, and you won't want to miss what's next. Now, let's talk about a state that lives and breathes independence: New Hampshire. Their motto? Live free or die. And they mean it. No income tax, no sales tax, a rugged libertarian streak that sets them apart from the rest of the U.S. But what if that freedom took them somewhere unexpected? Here's where it gets wild. In 2022, a group of lawmakers actually proposed an amendment to the state constitution. Get this, to let New Hampshire vote on secession. It didn't pass, but the fact it was even on the table? That's huge. New Hampshire's economy is tied to Canada in a big way. Over $8 billion in trade annually, from machinery to forest products. Businesses there rely on Canadian partners to stay afloat. Culturally, it's a match too. Small, rural, obsessed with the outdoors, hiking, skiing, you name it. It feels more like Canada than Florida or Nevada. And there's this thing called the Free State Project, where libertarians are moving in to push for less government. What if that push went further? What if New Hampshire said, "We're done with the US," and looked north to Canada's decentralized system? It's a long shot, but in a state this independent, anything's possible. Minnesota's up next, and this one's a no-brainer. Ever been there? It's practically Canada already. They share a 550-mile border, and Canada's their biggest trading partner, over $7 billion in exports last year alone. Energy, machinery, agriculture. It's a two-way street, but it's more than dollars and cents. Minnesotans and Canadians are cut from the same cloth. Friendly folks, thick accents, a love for hockey that runs deep, and winters so brutal they'd make anyone else run screaming. Politically, Minnesota's progressive bent, think healthcare, education, lines up with Canada more than, say, the Deep South. Here's a history lesson. Before it became a state in 1858, parts of Minnesota were under British control, tied to Canada's fur trade. Even now, tons of Minnesotans have family across the border or hold dual citizenship. So, picture this. If the US hit a rough patch, political chaos, economic collapse, could Minnesota turn north? It's not hard to imagine. We're halfway through. Hit that subscribe button if you're hooked. Trust me, the next one's a game changer. What if a state relied more on Canada than its own country? That's North Dakota in a nutshell. This quiet, windswept place might not grab headlines, but its economy is glued to Canada. $6 billion in exports every year. Grain, oil, machinery. It's a gold mine. Canada even supplies a big chunk of their power. Farmers here depend on Canadian buyers, and residents cross the border for everything: healthcare, shopping, jobs. In some towns, Canadian license plates are as common as American ones. Politically, North Dakota's small government, pro-business vibe matches Canada's western provinces, like Alberta, more than DC's bureaucracy. Get this. Back in the day, there were talks of merging North Dakota and Manitoba into one economic zone. It never happened, but the idea's still floating out there. So, if the US ever stumbled, could North Dakota say, "Why stick around," and make it official with Canada? It's a crazy thought, until you see how deep those ties run. Montana's next, and this one's a beauty. Big skies, rugged mountains, a 545-mile border with Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. It's already got a Canadian flavor. Trade? Over $700 million in goods flow north yearly. Cattle, timber, minerals. But it's the people that seal the deal. Montanans live for the outdoors, ranching, hunting, surviving winters that'd freeze your soul. Sound familiar? It's Canada to a T. History backs this up. Back in the 1800s, Canadian fur traders ran the show here before Montana joined the US. Today, plenty of folks have dual citizenship or family ties across the line. And here's the kicker. Montana's got a strong anti-federal streak. They feel ignored by Washington, left to fend for themselves. What if they decided Canada's system, closer, simpler, fit better? It's a stretch, but not impossible. Subscribe if you're loving this. We've got some heavy hitters coming up. Washington State. You know it. Tech giants, coffee shops, rainy days. But beneath that surface, something's brewing. This state's lifeline is Canada, over $20 billion in trade yearly. Hydroelectric power pours in from British Columbia, and Seattle's port thrives on Canadian shipping routes. Politically, Washington's as progressive as it gets. Healthcare, climate action, social justice. More Canadian than American in spirit. There's even talk of a high-speed rail linking Seattle to Vancouver, shrinking the gap to under 2 hours. Culturally, it's a seamless fit. Outdoor lovers, tech-driven, coffee-obsessed. People already bounce between the two cities like it's nothing. So, if the US split apart, could Washington drift north? It's closer to Canada than the rest of America in more ways than one. Oregon's a wild card. It often feels out of sync with the US. $4 billion in trade with Canada, sure, but it's the vibe that stands out. Environmental laws, labor rights, healthcare priorities. They're closer to British Columbia than most US states. Portland and Vancouver, Canada, could be twins. Progressive, outdoorsy, a little quirky. Some rural Oregonians want to join Idaho, but others in the West whisper about Canada. If the federal government pushed too hard, could Oregon look north for a system that fits? It's not mainstream yet, but the seeds are there. Alaska's the wild card of wild cards. It's America's last frontier, but it's cut off, closer to Canada than the lower 48. Billions flow in oil, seafood, and timber trade. You can't even drive to the US mainland without crossing Canada. It was Russian once, proving it's not locked to America forever. Military ties with Canada via NORAD are tight too. If the US faltered, could Alaska go its own way or join Canada? It's already halfway there. Top spot, Michigan. This state's practically Canadian already. $80 billion in trade yearly. Detroit and Windsor are one industrial beast, with trucks crossing daily. The auto industry? Parts ping-pong across the border. Bridges, power grids, even history. Michigan flirted with joining Canada in the 1800s after the Toledo War. Could it happen now? It's living like a province already. Could it really happen? So, could these states break away and join Canada? It sounds insane, right? But look at the facts: trade, culture, history. These places are tied to Canada in ways we don't always see. If the US hit a breaking point, who's to say they wouldn't jump? Borders shift, nations change. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe, and share this with someone who'd love it. See you next time.